On the 2nd of June 2015, at the Alton Towers theme park in the UK, a rollercoaster train came to an abrupt halt at the top of a hill. The 16 passengers on board waited, uncertain what was happening. After some time, a tannoy announcement played assuring them that nothing was amiss, and that a minor technical issue was being resolved. Several minutes passed, and then, without any further announcement, the ride restarted. What happened next would change the lives of most of the passengers on board that train, forever. In 2012, Alton Towers, the most well-known theme park in the UK, announced that it would construct a brand new rollercoaster for the 2013 season. It would replace a much-loved but now defunct indoor rollercoaster known as the Black Hole in the futuristic X-Sector section of the park. Further details were kept secret, with the ride given the name Secret Weapon 7. This was a marketing tactic that Alton Towers had used before, allowing them to generate excitement over the course of a full season by gradually publishing information about the upcoming ride. As construction of the new ride began, details were indeed released little by little. It emerged that the rollercoaster would include a world record-breaking 14 inversions, and would be themed with several special effects. These included hypnotic spinning discs, sprays of mist, and flashing video screens. Promotional materials hinted that the ride was a psychological experience designed to manipulate the minds of riders and leave them smiling. And when the name was finally announced in January 2013, it was the Smiler. There was a great deal of excitement about the Smiler. Alton Towers had overseen a competition offering a chance to be one of the first to ride it. TV personalities and newsreaders were pictured enjoying, or at least riding, the ride, and a viral marketing campaign saw the ride's logo appear all over the country, including spray-painted on a flock of sheep. The grand opening of the ride was initially scheduled for March 2013, but just weeks before this, the coaster stalled on a lift hill during a press preview, requiring celebrities and journalists to be evacuated from the train. Alton Towers had to push back the opening date of their new ride, frustrating guests who had booked travel and hotel stays with the express intention of riding it. Once the ride did open to the public at the end of May 2013, issues continued to surface. Cars would occasionally stall on a swooping batwing element of the track, and on one occasion 50 riders were evacuated from the coaster after a bolt worked loose and fell from a track joint, causing a small gap to appear between two track sections. In a separate incident, months later, several plastic guide wheels fell from one of the trains, causing minor injuries to 4 riders. Alton Towers noted that these events, though alarming, represented the kind of teething troubles that might be expected from any large, complicated, and brand new machine. Indeed, many rollercoasters do experience some mechanical and maintenance issues in their first months of operation. In the case of the Smiler, it appeared that these were, indeed, teething issues. Though the 2013 season was marked by negative press and ride closures, the 2014 season went well, and the ride established itself as a new favourite among parkgoers. On the 2nd of June 2015, the Smiler was operating as normal in sunny but blustery conditions. Winds were gusting at up to 74 km per hour, or 46 miles per hour, strong enough to close some of the park's other rides. The Smiler, however, was unaffected. Shortly after 1 p.m, a ride operator on the Smiler noticed a warning light indicating a fault with the ride. Riders were removed from a train sitting at the station, the ride was temporarily closed, and Alton Towers' in-house engineers were called to the scene. All morning, there had been 4 trains in operation on the ride. Staff had been just about to add a 5th train to the track to help increase rider throughput, a normal thing to do on such a busy day. While engineers worked to resolve the fault, staff took advantage of the downtime to add this extra train. There were now 5 trains on the ride in total. The engineers quickly resolved the original fault and sent around an empty train. This failed to engage with the second lift hill midway through the ride and required engineers to walk out to the car, and manually push it until it engaged with the lift hill. Thereafter, this train completed a circuit of the track without issue. Another train was then dispatched. This one engaged with the lift hill but stalled out of sight of the control cabin on the batwing section of the track. This was most likely due to a gust of wind that slowed down the unloaded, and thus underweight, train, and left it without enough momentum to complete this element. At this point, a miscommunication took place. The engineers present assumed that there were 4 trains on the track, not 5. 4 trains were clearly visible in the station. They handed control back to operators who reopened the ride, loaded a train with riders, and sent it onto the track. At this stage, it appears, nobody was aware that an empty, stalled train was stuck on the track. Automatic safety systems halted the fully loaded train just before the batwing section of the ride. The computer system indicated to operators that the track ahead of the train was occupied. The engineers, still under the impression that 4 trains in total were in use, concluded that the obstacle the ride had detected was a computer glitch. Though there were CCTV cameras in place, the displays were small and it was difficult to see any obstruction on the batwing section using these cameras. The engineers overrode the computer system, effectively telling it to ignore the obstacle it detected in the batwing section and go ahead and return the train loaded with passengers to the station. The computer system attempted to do just this. It restarted the loaded train, which plummeted down through the loop above which it was held, entered the batwing, and smashed at speed into the stalled test train. The 2 cars, tangled together, rolled back and forth on the batwing element nearly a dozen times before coming to a complete stop. Passengers on board had suffered devastating injuries, particularly those sitting in the front row. To compound this, they were now stuck on a part of the track that was extremely difficult to access. It was high above the ground, with no easy means of evacuation. On-site emergency workers attended immediately, assessed the situation and called emergency services. Though police, paramedics and firefighters arrived quickly on scene, they were unable to retrieve the trapped riders until they had constructed a temporary scaffold tower beneath the ride. Some paramedics, despite instructions to wait for the completion of the scaffold, climbed up to assist the injured. In total, it took around 4.5 hours for all passengers to be freed. All 16 victims survived the crash and were transported to hospital, the most seriously injured by air ambulance. Everyone on board the train had been injured to some degree, with riders suffering whiplash, internal injuries, and severe leg injuries. 2 riders had to have legs amputated, and others would take months, if not years, to recover from their injuries. Among the injured were 17-year-old Joe Pugh and 19-year-old Leah Washington. They had been at the start of a first date at the park when the accident took place. The crash caused Joe severe knee injuries and resulted in the amputation of one of Leah's legs. Merlin Entertainments, the parent company of Alton Towers, cooperated fully with the investigation that ensued. From the beginning, they offered extensive support to the victims, publicly stating that the victims of the crash would want for nothing in terms of compensation and support. While the long process of treating injuries began, the ride, and several others in Merlin-owned parks, remained closed, subject to a lengthy investigation. While the direct cause of the crash had been human error on the part of the park engineers, it was found that the errors these individuals had made were the result of inadequate training and processes. The park's engineers, for example, had not been trained to appoint a lead engineer for each job they attended, and weren't required to check the logbook of any ride they were working on. Appointing a lead engineer for their work on the Smiler would have reduced confusion, and checking the Smiler's logbook would have informed them that an extra train had been added to the ride. Additionally, engineers were not trained or encouraged to share information. Trains had previously stalled or valleyed on the batwing section of the Smiler, and all engineers should have been briefed to anticipate this possibility. As it was, only the engineers that had attended a previous incident of stalling were aware of the issue. Engineers were also unclear about the rules around moving trains, and there was no formal advice regarding the number of test vehicles to be sent around a ride after a repair, with this instead being left to the engineer to decide on a case-by-case basis. Moreover, some engineers had an incorrect understanding of how the Smiler system differed from some other rollercoaster systems in the park. All of these procedural problems were compounded by simple mechanical ones. The ride should not have been operating at all in the weather conditions on the day, as gusts of wind up to 74 kilometers or 46 miles per hour had been recorded, and the ride was not designed to run in winds any greater than 55 kilometers or 34 miles per hour. The high winds had resulted in the closure of at least one other ride in the park, but the Smiler had continued to operate despite the unsuitable conditions. In light of this, Merlin was fined £7.5 million, reduced to $5 million because of their immediate guilty plea. They also cooperated in civil claims against them by the victims and their families. Multiple adjustments were made to the ride system, and staff were fully retrained. With these changes complete, the Smiler reopened less than a year after the crash, in a move that garnered some negative press for the park. It has, however, gone on to have a clean safety record, and is now a popular ride within Alton Towers. Joe Pugh and Leah Washington remained close in the aftermath of the crash, and some years later, married one another in a ceremony in Leeds. They, and others, have moved on from the crash that caused them such serious injury in June 2015.